All right. So today we have Kirstin Hill, which is, from the Bird Friendly program, talking to us about bird friendly coffee. So I'm just going to turn it over to Kirstin. So go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt. And thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. It's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to chat with you. I had a chance to kind of talk to Matt, get to know him a little bit through the Safe North American Songbird program, through the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And yeah, this is a really wonderful opportunity for our bird friendly program to share a little bit about our work with a group of folks who are dedicated birders and interested in bird conservation. So thank you so much for having me. So we were talking a little bit in the chat as folks were kind of filtering in about if you are a bird friendly coffee drinker, what it is that you're drinking. It sounded like we had some folks that not just knew about bird friendly, but were actively already drinking it. So hopefully a little bit of what I'll kind of do today will be less of kind of like trying to sell you on bird friendly, since it seems like we've already got some converts, and more about maybe providing some background and history on our program, who we are, what we do, so that way as you go out into the world, you talk to your friends and family about things they can do to be better stewards to birds and to the environment. You can feel better equipped and more knowledgeable about what bird friendly is and what difference it makes for birds and other wildlife. So just to start off with a bit of background. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Kirstin Hill. I'm the Bird Friendly Program Manager for the Smithsonian Bird Friendly Program and the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center. So this is kind of just a little bit about us within the Smithsonian. So we are part of the world's largest museum and research complex. Our center itself was founded in 1991, but the Smithsonian is over 200 years old. So it's a really kind of longstanding institution that consists of 19 museums, plus the Smithsonian's National Zoo and Conservation Biology Institute. And then we've got research projects and lots of different work happening around the world. And our goal, our mission as a center is the dedication to understanding, conserving, and championing the grand phenomenon of bird migration. And of course, it's home to our Smithsonian Bird Friendly Coffee program. So why birds? I know I don't really have to sell that to this group, but sometimes folks ask, why are you focusing on birds? What does that mean when there's all these big environmental issues that are going on? And I think this quote really sums it up quite nicely, that if you take care of birds, you take care of most of the big environmental problems in the world. So birds are a really good indicator species. So if things are going well for birds, if bird populations are healthy and vibrant and thriving, things are going pretty well in an ecosystem. Conversely, if things are not going well for birds, then it's often an indicator of a lot of other problems that are happening within that ecosystem that will affect its ability to remain balanced and will ultimately affect us as people as well, if we think of ourselves as totally separate, which I'm like going to bank that most folks on this call do not, but some folks out there certainly do. And of course, folks on this call probably are very familiar with this stat here that published in 2019, we experienced the loss of approximately 3 billion North American birds since the 1970s, which is a really dramatic decline in birds that we're seeing here. So put in other terms, 1 in 4 birds is gone since the 1970s, which is pretty stark. And then when we think about migratory birds in particular, 2.5 billion of these birds are lost since 1970. So there's a couple stats on the screen for you there showing a pretty significant population loss in not just birds, but migratory birds in particular. And one of the most significant drivers of this loss is, of course, habitat destruction. So when you think about habitat destruction through the lens of migratory birds and migratory species, you're looking at a bunch of different areas. So this is a really neat animation through, with great thanks to eBird, kind of showing the species diversity and what you're seeing through the different times of year. So right about now is where we are now. So you can start to see the birds kind of moving down south for their overwintering period. And so this has kind of been the Migratory Bird Center, Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center's area of focus in kind of creating, doing a lot of our research and really ultimately creating this bird-friendly program to combat habitat destruction in these overwintering grounds. So how we landed there is, pictured here is Russ Greenberg in the bottom left corner. He's the founding director of the Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, and along with Dr. Robert Rice, established the Bird Friendly Coffee program in the early 2000s. But even before our program was formally created, Greenberg and other ornithologists were observing overwintering migratory bird grounds, and they were noting what species are present and what types of habitat they were using. And what they discovered through some of the notes kind of in the journal here dating back to 1987, it was discovered that shaded areas on coffee farms were providing really high value habitat for migratory birds. So they were kind of doing more than other types of crops, other types of areas. So if that shade was maintained, that meant that it was a high likelihood that there were going to be good, healthy bird populations there as well. And that's kind of unsurprising when you look at the intersection of coffee and biodiversity hotspots worldwide. So you can see the biodiversity hotspots. So those are the areas that you're seeing in orange, and the areas in which coffee is cultivated are in yellow. And then there's a couple little blue pockets in there as well. That's actually where cocoa is cultivated, which is a little nod to our next certified crop, which is going to be bird friendly cocoa, rolling out early next year, which we're super excited about. But as you can see, there's a lot of intersection between these areas. So if we can protect high quality habitat on coffee growing lands, we know that we can do good things for birds and for biodiversity. Now, coffee is actually the second most traded commodity worldwide. So it's everywhere. It's as I was mentioning kind of earlier before we started, like a multi-cup a day habit for several of us, many of us really, and it's cultivated on over 27 million acres of land globally. So there's a lot of land that's being used to produce a lot of coffee, and there's a lot of coffee moving through the global supply chain. Now, historically, coffee was grown entirely in the shade. So under these, the canopies of forests, that's kind of where the coffee was planted and grown. But in the 1970s, farmers started removing trees and transitioning to a sun-grown monoculture, which resulted in higher yields for them. So more coffee beans for them to sell per acre or hectare of land that they were working on. And unfortunately, that trend became the norm. And today, 3/4 of the world's coffee is farmed using practices that leave no place for birds, or worse, are actively destroying forest habitat. And it's not just a problem for birds, but for biodiversity overall, because when you compare sun-grown monoculture, it's easy to see why the shade-grown coffee farms are supporting significantly more birds than the sun-grown alternative. So these two pictures, really, they don't need much explanation whatsoever. That sun-grown monoculture on the left, you can see very little space for birds, very little space for other wildlife, whereas on the right, if you don't know what you're looking for, it can be hard to tell where the coffee is actually growing. So in order to protect birds, we need to protect more systems like what you're seeing on the right-hand side here, and that is why the Bird Friendly program was established. So a little bit of background there. Now we'll kind of get into Bird Friendly and who we are and what specifically it is that we're looking at here. So Smithsonian Bird Friendly is a third-party certification program that was created by Smithsonian to protect wildlife habitat on coffee farms. So in the simplest terms, bird friendly coffee is coming from farms that provide good, high-quality forest-like habitat for birds and other wildlife. Our program was created in the mid-1990s. We're kind of the seeds of those ideas coming together with all that research, and then in 2000 launched formally. And since then, we have taken a lot of pride in the fact that we uphold the strictest environmental criteria currently on the market, and really ever on the market, for protecting high quality habitat for biodiversity. So that kind of makes us the gold standard, which we're really excited about. So all bird friendly coffee is 100% shade grown. It's 100% organic. Being organic is a prerequisite of bird friendly. So you can't have bird friendly coffee without also having an organic coffee. And we also maintain 100% product purity, which means that we don't allow for any blending between non-certified coffee and our certified coffee. So if you see that bird friendly logo on your coffee, you know that 100% of that coffee is coming from a habitat that is really strong and really healthy for wildlife. So how does this program work? How does all this kind of come together? So we have certification at the farm level, and then we have licensing agreements at the importer and roaster level that allow the bird-friendly coffee to move through the supply chain. So we make sure that we keep the costs down for farmers to participate in the program, and then we do our best to try to make sure that these folks get price premiums for that they are growing. So in order, the certification logo that they get kind of provides them with this market access to all the folks like you all who are out there looking to buy bird-friendly coffee. So only those who are maintaining that high quality habitat can use that certification. So the farms, they only pay to have their property inspected, which is a cost that they negotiate with the third-party independent auditors that go out and perform these inspections and then certify the farms. And then what we do as Smithsonian is provide free training to those inspection companies so that they can kind of perform those inspections, make sure that they know everything they need to know in order to properly certify a bird-friendly farm. And then where we do kind of collect fees is through our royalty payments, which occur at the roaster level. So our roasters pay 10 cents per pound royalty, which funds Smithsonian research. And that's kind of how our program keeps running and kind of keeps moving. And any funds that we have go back into biodiversity conservation and Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center research efforts. Now, what do we look at specifically when we go out and certify a farm? So one of the big tenets that we look for is, of course, the shade canopy. So what we're looking for there is, if you can picture standing in the middle of a forest, you look straight up, if 40% what you're seeing forest canopy going to meet the bird-friendly certification criteria. And we do that after pruning season. So in theory, after things are kind of, been trimmed back a little bit and to afford the best amount of canopy for year round. We're looking at that 40% number there. We're also looking for a minimum canopy height of at least 12 meters. So what that means is it's not just smaller trees that are covering over the coffee crop. We're talking pretty big 12-meter high trees that are kind of providing that big top level of shade over the coffee crop. Other things we look for are tree diversity. So we want to have at least 11 tree species found on each bird-friendly farm. So it's not just one single tree. So that allows for greater diversity of habitat and greater diversity of food sources, things like that, for birds and other wildlife to utilize when they are on the farm. And then we want at least 60% of that vegetation to be native. And the reason behind that is the insects that live on native vegetation are actually healthier for birds. They've got more nutrients packed inside of them than those that are living on or around trees that are non-native to an area. So it has to do with kind of the health of the insect, and think about it's like the difference between eating a really high quality granola bar that's got everything that you need in it versus eating a donut for breakfast. So one's going to give you lots of nutrients, the other's still going to fill you, but nutrients probably aren't going to be there. Other things that we look for are other habitat kind of criteria. So these are more along the lines of recommendations that we make to farmers. So it's not going to be a pass-fail, kind of like the other habitat criteria we look at. But these are things that we note and we recommend and encourage farmers to maintain on their habitats. So those are things like structural diversity. So we want to have multiple layers of canopy wherever we can. We want to maintain those stumps and snags that act as really great habitat and places to hide for birds and other wildlife. And then we want folks to maintain things like epiphytes, ferns, orchids, bromeliads, which are great for insects and great for birds as well. And then along rivers, if a farm were to have a river, a body of water, a stream, a creek, things like that, we want to have those riparian buffers in place as well. And then, as I mentioned before, the last kind of big criteria that is a guarantee for all bird-friendly certified farms is that they are certified as organic. So no artificial pesticides or fertilizers ever. So with all of that, a quick glimpse at where we are in 2022. So in sort of our program's history, we've had steady growth of the Bird Friendly program since its inception and since the first kind of nuggets of the idea came together in the mid-90s. But today we're proud to certify 18,000 hectares in 13 different countries. And we work with a producer community of about 5,400 individuals who work together to produce about 38 million pounds of bird-friendly coffee each year. So those numbers might sound pretty big, but all things considered, it's actually quite small. When you think about the global supply chain of coffee, we actually only certify less than 1% of all coffee that's grown. So there's a lot of coffee that's out there, a lot of potential for our bird-friendly program to grow. So quick poll, we'll stop for a moment here. I'd like to know, and you can throw your answers in the chat here, what or how many migratory birds do folks think benefit from bird-friendly coffee? So if you were to take a guess of how many species are kind of benefiting from bird-friendly coffee, I'd love to know what you're thinking there. All right, so we've got 70. Paul says 70. Mary Lou says 300. Lydia says 150. These are some great guesses. Excellent. 500 says John. Good guesses, good guesses. I love it. So when we actually take a look at the science behind bird-friendly coffee, the result is actually 1 in 10 bird species globally utilizes habitat on or near bird-friendly coffee farms. So bird-friendly farms can support about 243 different bird species. And this is based on field data that was collected in Peru, compared to partial shade, which is only about 79 bird species, and sun-grown coffee, which is 61 bird species. So it's actually over 4 times more birds than sun-grown monocultures when we think about who is protected by maintaining this habitat. But it's not just birds that are benefiting from bird-friendly coffee farms. It's also wildlife and people. So when we think about bird-friendly farms and the types of things that that they provide and they kind of protect through their, the maintaining of that habitat, we're not just providing habitat for birds, we're also providing really high quality habitat for amphibians, for small mammals, and for insects as well. So these are other, kind of when we think about umbrella species protected under bird-friendly farms, lots of other animals that are going to be found and utilizing this habitat as well that wouldn't be able to thrive nearly as well in, or not at all within those sun-grown monocultures. Bird-friendly farms are also better protected from climate extremes. So when you think about maintaining that shade canopy over your farm, what's going to happen is if you have severe heat events, really, really bright sun coming down, your coffee crop is more protected from that because you're maintaining that shade. It becomes a little bit cooler under the trees, less likely for the crop to kind of spoil or go bad before it can be kind of picked and taken out and entered into the supply chain. And then when you think about things like landslides or flood events, if you're maintaining those trees, those strong roots are going to really firm up your land, and it's going to be less likely that your land's going to get washed out from things like floods and landslides, things like that. The habitat that those trees and vegetation that's maintained, they're also increasing soil fertility and moisture. And then of course the trees act as excellent carbon sinks, capturing that carbon from the atmosphere, bringing it back down into the soil. So not just climate resilient, but helping to mitigate climate change as well. And then these farmers themselves, they can actually earn more money. So many of our farmers actually grow fruit trees as some of the trees that they're keeping over their coffee crops. So they have a secondary source of income there. It's not just the coffee they're able to sell, but it's also things like papaya or banana that can be sold as additional crops that are grown on that same land as the coffee. And then of course the birds, they're not just freeloaders, right? So they provide some really important and awesome ecosystem services to the farmers. So when you provide a space for birds to live and to thrive, you also get pollination services, you get seed dispersal, insect control, rodent control. So it really kind of goes both ways. So the farmers, they're helping the birds, and the birds are helping the farmers as well. In fact, there was a study of insect pest control in Jamaica that showed that birds boosted farmer income by between $75 and $300 per hectare And some of that is largely to do with the reduction of coffee berry borer infestation and damage. So when we think about that, in Jamaica, these 3 migratory species that you see here, the prairie warbler, black-throated blue warbler, and American redstart, they were responsible for taking out about 50% of the detections of cherry berry or coffee cherry borers. So these 3 species alone kind of wiped out about 50% of these cherry coffee berry borer. My gosh, it's a mouthful at the end of the day, which are a major threat to coffee production. So the borers, they live and breed inside coffee berries, and their presence severely impacts the quality of the coffee beans that are produced. But these 3 birds, if they're around, and if other birds are around as well, and these birds, they rely on the shade trees that are present on bird-friendly farms, then the coffee berry borer becomes much less of a threat to wildlife, or excuse me, to the farmers, given that these birds are kind of there eating them up and getting nutrition from them along the way. So another poll, so I'll stop and I'll take a breath, take a drink here, for folks here is, do we think that shade-grown coffee is the same as bird-friendly coffee? So you can put your answer in the chat there. Do you think that shade-grown coffee is the same as bird-friendly coffee? So hopefully you can see the value of maintaining this forest-like habitat on coffee farms, but this is one of the most frequent questions that we get. Is it just enough to drink shade-grown coffee, do we think? All right, so we're seeing some good answers come in. No idea. I don't think so. Bird friendly is shade grown, but shade grown is not necessarily bird friendly. Shade grown is probably better than sun grown. Good answers here. Excellent. Thank you. Sometimes I ask these poll questions and folks just kind of, don't answer. So I really appreciate the participation here from everyone. So I really like the answer that Lydia provided here. She said bird-friendly coffee is shade-grown, but shade-grown is not necessarily bird-friendly. That is probably the most accurate way to describe what's going on here. So there's a number of different certification schemes that are out there, a number of different things that are out there kind of describing how coffee can be grown and if it's good for biodiversity, good for the environment. And it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed by that, or to think, oh, this is information overload. There's too much that's going on out there. But this, so we created this kind of handy little chart to help share a little bit more about the different certifications that you might be familiar with, the different terms that are out there, to kind of understand what they mean and how they play together and how they are different. So on the left-hand column there are the logos that you may have seen, except for shade grown. There's just kind of an illustration of a coffee, coffee plant. But these are logos. Hopefully, by this point, you've heard and you know a little bit about Bird Friendly. Rainforest Alliance is another one that a lot of folks are familiar with. Fair Trade and Fair Trade International. They're kind of 2 different certification schemes under that Fair Trade umbrella. And then there's, of course, organic as well. There's the US and Canadian organic logos in there, but lots of different organic certifying bodies that are out there in different parts of the world. So when we think about shade cover specifically and what that means, so for bird friendly, we're strictly regulating that. As I kind of just described, we're looking for that 40% shade cover. We want lots of tree species, lots of tree diversity, organic practices, things like that. But we're very dedicated to looking and maintaining that high quality shade on coffee farms. When you look at Rainforest Alliance's certification, shade coverage is optional. So it's something that folks can do as part of their certification, but it is not a requirement. So a lot of times, as we've learned kind of a little bit more about Rainforest Alliance, I know for me personally, it's a bit funny that they are called Rainforest Alliance when they're not necessarily trying to maintain the shade of the rainforest, or naturally kind of what you would think. Now they do some really great things, and we want to make it clear we're not disparaging them. We don't even see them as competitors really, because what they do is quite different than what we do. But what they do, they don't necessarily look at shade cover there. That is something that is optional. For fair trade, it's not something that's looked at all. So it's not regulated. Same for organic. And then for the shade grown kind of common term there, it's not well regulated or defined. So it's a very generic term that doesn't have a set definition. And because of that, it becomes very difficult and challenging to measure. When we say shade grown, does that mean you have 3 trees in total on your farm? Or does that mean you are growing in a complete agroforestry system with a really robust canopy over top? So thinking about other things, that are kind of looked at within these certification schemes, we can go next to pesticide regulation. So for bird friendly, we're seeing 0 synthetic pesticides or fertilizers. So maintaining that same high quality of, what is regulated, what is allowed use on farms as organic. So those definitions you'll see are the same. For fair trade, again, this is something that's optional. They don't look at pesticides. They have some guidance within what they say to folks of sort of some recommendations, but it has nothing to do with whether or not they are certified. And then within Rainforest Alliance, they do allow a limited number of pesticides. They kind of weed out those that are considered to be the most harmful to biodiversity and to the environment, but they do still allow for a limited pesticide regimen on their crop. And then for shade grown, of course, because it's not a certification, we have no idea if pesticides are used within those farming systems. And then lastly, that last column that you're going to see there under biodiversity protection, for bird friendly, we're looking first, we want all farms to be providing habitat for diverse community of birds and other wildlife. And that's kind of that's our MO. That's kind of why we came to be and what we are primarily focused on. When you look at Rainforest Alliance and what they do is that some farms provide some habitat for birds and other wildlife, but it's not necessarily as robust as bird friendly is. For fair trade, again, their focus is very, very different. So they're focused on making sure that the producers are receiving equitable income for the work that they're doing. And so as a result, they do not have a focus on biodiversity protection. So there's no regulations in place to help birds or other wildlife. When we think about organic, biodiversity benefits from the chemical restrictions, but we do not have any habitat requirements that are in place. So beyond just not using pesticides and fertilizers, there's nothing in place at that organic level. And then for shade grown, again, it's a big question mark. So there's some farms that are providing some habitat for birds and other wildlife, but there's absolutely no guarantee as to what that looks like because it's a very generic term. So as you can see, lots of different terms that are out there. It can be kind of a confusing sphere to navigate. So if I were to provide a recommendation, I would say if you're looking specifically at biodiversity protection, the strongest areas that or the strongest criteria that are in place are the bird friendly criteria. Then after that, it's actually probably the organic criteria. Because we still have those biodiversity benefits from the lack of chemicals and pesticides that are in there. And there are, we don't know what's happening with the shade, but at least we know that pesticides aren't being used. And then as we kind of go further down the chain, Rainforest Alliance provides some other benefits to habitat and to wildlife there, but not as strict as organic or bird friendly. Fair trade, again, kind of a little less than Rainforest when you're thinking about the benefits to biodiversity. And then kind of at the bottom of the barrel there is shade grown, because we have no idea what it really means. There's no agreed upon definition for that there. So I hope that answers your question, Lydia. What's the better option, organic or rainforest? I would go with an organic coffee. If I go to the shop and I need to pick something up and there's no bird friendly option available, and for whatever reason I haven't brought my own along with me, I look for an organic more so than a rainforest. Excellent. All right, so moving along. So despite the obvious benefits to biodiversity, farmers, climate, kind of all that we've talked about here, our certification remains relatively niche. So you all are kind of a bit of an anomaly in the folks that I've talked to, in that not only are several of you knowledgeable about what bird friendly was and that it exists as a certification scheme, but you are already drinking it yourselves. So not everyone is like you. This is a really great and wonderful room to be in of folks that are kind of already supportive by and large of bird friendly coffee. But even though our program has grown, our supply, so the amount of bird friendly coffee that's being produced at the farm level, is exceeding our demand. So the amount of coffee that enters into the marketplace and is consumed with that bird friendly label on it. Now, the danger here for us is that not just is it not healthy for our program, it's also a risk to the habitat that it protects. So if farmers aren't receiving a benefit, if they're not receiving, a fair, a fair go and a good market for their coffee, then they may leave the program. And it may not be because they want to leave the program. It may be because they can't afford to maintain the certification, that they need to convert their land to something else in order to make ends meet and to feed their families, that they may be getting out of coffee altogether. So they might be switching to a more lucrative crop type like an avocado or something like that, where they might be able to make more money. So there's lots of reasons why, this is kind of a danger. And then of course, if they leave the program, then there's no guarantee that habitat is going to remain, and most likely it's going to actually change and degrade and kind of disappear eventually. So what we're trying to do within the Bird Friendly program is to close that gap. So we're working to overcome what we see as pretty low consumer awareness, confusion about what bird friendly is. We actually had an outreach event over the summer where the #1 asked question was, so it's coffee you feed your birds? Do they birds drink coffee? And we had to say, oh, no, it's actually coffee that's good for birds in the sense that it's good for wild birds, but it's not necessarily anything you're feeding to your birds. The birds aren't eating the coffee, nothing quite of that nature. So lots of things that we kind of are still working on in clearing up confusion and spreading the word on what it is that we're doing. And then the other thing we're looking to do is increase product availability through this outreach and marketing. And so a lot of what we've done over the past couple of years is work really closely with the zoo and aquarium community to build resources that allow us to spread the bird friendly message, encourage folks to drink bird friendly as a conservation action, and really work to get bird friendly into more communities, starting with zoos and aquariums. And then our hope and our plan is for this to kind of feed out and bleed out into the surrounding communities around zoos and aquariums as bird friendly becomes, something that folks become more aware of. They're requesting from their local coffee roasters, they're buying and looking for in their local shops. So demonstrating that market demands to help increase the sale and support of bird friendly coffee through kind of throughout North America. And so where that comes in, for if folks are thinking of, well, how can I be a part of this? What can I do? Of course, make the switch. If you haven't already, I highly encourage you to consider making the switch to a bird friendly certified coffee. The easiest way for you to do that is to visit drinkbirdfriendly.com, where you can buy bird friendly coffee from a number of our different roasters. We've got a community 50 roasters or so that are roasting and selling their own bird friendly coffee. We've got many different origins, many different roasts. We've got decafs, we've got espressos, we've got, tasting notes, kind of something for everybody. So I encourage you to kind of go check that out and have the coffee delivered right to your door. If you are a fan of a local coffee that you really like, and you feel like they have especially if they have a really good sustainability mission or a sustainability ethic, you can always ask them to begin selling bird friendly certified coffee. And that's one of the really neat things that we've seen come out of the work we've been doing with zoos and aquariums is these institutions have kind of been bringing new roasters into our program as they kind of say, hey, we've got a contract with you, but we want to be doing the right thing for biodiversity. So would you consider starting to sell bird friendly certified coffee? And then they've kind of come into our program from there. So you can talk to your favorite local coffee shop and say, hey, I would love it if you would offer a bird friendly certified option. And if they say, sure, we'll look into it, send them my way. I'm happy to chat with them, tell them and explain kind of how the program works and see that through to completion. And then, of course, a really critical thing that we could always use help with is spreading the word on bird-friendly coffee. So any of the things that I've mentioned here today, sharing with your friends, your family, your circle of folks that care about wildlife and the planet, letting them know that bird-friendly exists. And this is a choice that they can make that can make a really impactful difference for birds and wildlife. So let's see one more. Question from John here. Do any of the major coffee shops sell bird-friendly coffee? I'm thinking Starbucks, etc. So Starbucks is our white whale. They do not sell bird-friendly certified coffee. Many moons ago, in the early days of the program, our program founder, Dr. Robert Royce, spoke with them about this, and they said we would go through your supply in about a day and a half. So we need to certify a lot more coffee in order to kind of get them on board and to overcome a lot more barrier for that to really happen. So they are a really big company that we would love to continue to engage with, but to move them it's like, you know, doing a U-turn in a cruise ship. It's going to take a lot of work, you know, to kind of really move the needle there. So the biggest roaster that we have that is involved in our program right now is probably Allegro Coffee. So if you're a Whole Foods shopper, you probably know Allegro as the house brand for coffee. So they have I believe it's called early morning blend or early bird blends that is a bird friendly certified option that you can get through them. Many of our other roasters are on the smaller side or kind of the mid to smaller roasters. So it may be a little bit more challenging to find their coffees locally, but we're always encouraging folks to kind of go to your favorite stores, your favorite, you know, natural food stores, you know, places like that, and to request bird-friendly coffee. And if they need help finding it, again, you put them in touch with me. That's my job to make bird-friendly coffee more accessible. So with that, I just wanted to kind of start to wrap up. If folks have other questions, please go ahead and throw them in the chat while I kind of have my little closing anecdote here as we kind of wrap up the me talking portion. I would love to hear the other additional questions and you know, insights folks have who are tuned in today. So the photo that you see on the bottom here, these are farmers from our Asabragui farm in Guatemala, and supporting bird friendly means supporting these folks, these farmers who are doing right by the environment and protecting really critical habitat for future migration cycles. And for that, what that also means is protecting those birds that are above right there. So you see on the left here, that's inside there, that's the ruby crowned kinglet found throughout the United States and Canada during the warm weather months. These guys are known for their kind of distinctive wing flicks. In the middle there is the olive-sided flycatcher. So these guys are actually near threatened, and they can be spotted perching on high bear perches, you know, with that kind of upright posture that you're seeing there. And they benefit from bird-friendly farms also by, you know, after they migrate south. And then all the way on the right-hand side, there's the Wilson's warbler. So these are small warblers with a black cap on the males. They use wooded habitat provided by bird-friendly farms when overwintering. So you're supporting everyone in this image when you're supporting bird-friendly coffee. And when we think about, you know, as Matt was saying early on, we've got some big migration nights coming up. We are kind of getting to in the heart of migration season. So the individual birds, migratory birds and songbirds that you're seeing out your window, they're starting to disappear. They're starting to head south. Where they are headed is these coffee farms, is these areas, you know, that provide this really high quality habitat for them, that allow them to rest and to recover after this really grueling migratory journey, and to have a nice and healthy and safe spot to overwinter, so they're better equipped to then return back up when the seasons change yet again. So it's a really interesting time to be thinking about and talking about bird-friendly coffee as we watch these guys and get ready to see, you know, birds kind of come through our area at different, you know, different stages where, you know, it's just kind of like very small windows in which you can see them. But when you think about that, you know, and you think about the coffee that you're drinking, it's, you know, these individual birds are benefiting, you know, the birds right outside your window. It's not, you know, just the native birds, you know, a continent away or several countries away. It's, you know, these individual birds that we're seeing, they're heading to these coffee farms and really benefiting from them. So with that, I will wrap up and just say thank you again so much for kind of inviting me to kind of speak with you this evening. It's an absolute pleasure to get to talk to folks. And if there are any additional questions, please feel free to add them into the chat. I am more than happy to answer them as you see fit, or if you want to kind of just pop on and, you know, pop off of mute. I think we could see one hand raised for Paul there. Happy to answer questions live as well.
All right, thanks, Kirstin. All right, go ahead, Paul.
Hey, sorry, I'm on my phone. Hey, Kirsten, great. Thank you for that presentation. I am a very happy bird-friendly coffee drinker, so it makes me feel better about my coffee every day. I was curious if anybody, I know there's probably been a lot of research about bird-friendly coffee, and I was curious if anybody has researched how larger maybe mammals or other animals utilize that space. Is there evidence that, things like peccaries and jaguars can utilize bird-friendly coffee plantations to move through the landscape, or is there anything along those lines?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Thank you for that, Paul. And that's something that I'm really interested in knowing about. So I work with a bunch of ornithologists, and I'm constantly asking them, well, who else is there? And a lot of the answer is like, oh, I don't know, we haven't looked into that just yet. But no, there's benefits to biodiversity for some of the charismatic megafauna as well. In fact, just the other day, I was talking to someone who works with Andean bears and how they're really excited about bird-friendly coffee because the Andean bears occupy many of the same countries in which and habitats are either near or adjacent to where our coffee farms are and things like that. So they see drink bird friendly as a great action to protect bears as well as birds. So, we're kind of taxonomically through lots of different species here as we're thinking about who benefits from the bird friendly farming systems. But that's an area in which we're definitely interested in doing more research to better understand, and we've got a couple irons in the fire to try to have a better answer when folks say, well, who else is there? Because we know that birds are incredible, they're amazing, really beautiful species. For some folks, it's helpful to have more information about the other biodiversity that's out there as well. So those habitats, they do intersect, provide corridors, things like that. But to give a more accurate and complete answer requires a little bit more research on our part.
All right. Yeah. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to either raise your hand, come off mute, or put it in the chat. The other thing I was going to do right now, I'll put in the chat just the link that brings you right to like where you can buy it online. So that's how I buy my coffee, is I buy most of my bird-friendly coffee online. And I kind of said it at the beginning, but maybe before other people were here, I've been sort of trying a bunch of different roasters. So I think, I don't know how many, do you know how many roasters offhand right now that you have that you can buy online? Maybe 20 some, 30?
Yeah, for who we can buy online, it's not quite all 50 because we have folks in a number of different countries. So we've got a contingent of roasters in Japan, in the United Kingdom. We've got one in the Czech Republic, a handful in Canada, and the rest are in the States. So yeah, it's a smaller number who's available on our where to buy online page, but certainly a good diversity there for folks to choose from to get started.
Yeah, so I recommend going there and looking around. As far as I know, there's nothing local. I mean, I'm in around the Chicago region. I know probably a lot of people on here are also in that area. I don't think there's anything local around here yet. Maybe if anyone knows anybody at like maybe one of the mid-size or something roasters that can try to coerce them into to starting to buy bird friendly, that'd be good if anyone has a hookup. But I think the closest, if you were going to try to go somewhere regionally, is like Indianapolis or somewhere up in Wisconsin. So surprising actually that we don't have one in and around Chicago. So I think that should be something we all work on. But yeah, so Paul, I see you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, just one more question. I was curious if it sounds like you don't necessarily need more growers on the ground at this exact moment, but is there anybody that I know outside of the neotropics, there's a lot of coffee growing that goes on in Vietnam and Asia and other regions of the world. Are there any similar certification programs for those part of the world, or any thoughts of long-term expanding beyond the neotropics?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So of the 13 countries in which we are producing bird-friendly coffee, 10 of them are in Latin America. But we also have coffee that's grown and produced and certified in Ethiopia, in Thailand, and in India. And we're working with a company now to see if we can get our first Indonesian bird-friendly coffee as well. So even though the birds that kind of started this program and the habitat areas that started this program are in the neotropics here in the American flyway, we're interested in certifying coffee growing lands worldwide. And so for us, the the speed at which and the amount in which we can grow is really contingent largely upon the fact that our team is consisting of 3 people. So we work our butts off just to try to keep things kind of going steady as they are, and to grow at the rate that we are currently able to grow. But we're always interested in expanding into reaching new markets. For us, it's just a matter of sort of capacity and how quickly we can bring folks on board. But absolutely. So if you know of any coffee farmers or growers in some of those areas in Asia that are high coffee producing countries like Vietnam, Borneo, Sumatra, let us know. We're always interested in having conversations with them and potentially looking to certify there as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just keep up the good work. It's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions, comments? Favorite coffees, whatever you want to put in the chat. Okay, so yeah, if there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Kirstin, for talking to us. Thanks everyone for joining us. And I'm going to end the recording. So I will do that.